When you are dealing with someone who is manipulative, controlling, or chronically self-absorbed, one of the hardest truths to face is that they are not going to change simply because you want them to. You could be the most reasonable, kind, intelligent, compassionate person, and it still wouldn't matter. The narcissistic personality does not yield to reason or empathy. They thrive on your emotional reactions, on your confusion, on your hope that someday they will get it. And that's the first step to outsmarting them. Understanding that what you are dealing with is not a relationship in the traditional sense, but a cycle of exploitation. The game changes when you stop expecting fairness or reciprocity. Narcissists feed on power and control. They need you to react, to defend yourself, to explain yourself, to get drawn into their chaos. Every time you do, you hand them fuel. Outsmarting them doesn't mean out-arguing them. You will never win in that arena because they don't play by rules of truth or accountability. Outsmarting them means starving the game of oxygen. That is where their breakdown begins. It isn't loud, it isn't dramatic. It's the erosion of their power when you don't play the role they've cast for you. One of the most effective tools you have is radical detachment. This is not indifference to your own life or your own feelings. Far from it. It is choosing not to dance in the circus they create. They provoke, you don't bite. They gaslight, you don't argue reality. You hold to your truth quietly and firmly. They insult. You don't scramble to prove your worth. You know who you are without their validation. At first, they will escalate. They will push harder because their control depends on getting a rise out of you. But when you don't give it, the power starts to slip. That is the beginning of their unraveling. Knowledge is another form of armor. When you can label the tactics, gaslighting, projection, triangulation, silent treatment, you stop personalizing them. Instead of thinking, why are they treating me this way? What did I do wrong? You say, that's gaslighting. Naming it creates distance. It keeps you grounded in reality rather than being swept into their distortions. Outsmarting a narcissist means moving from being a player on their board to being the observer of the game. And the observer always has the advantage. Boundaries are not just suggestions, they are lifelines. A narcissist will test them, push them, ridicule them, and punish you for setting them. But boundaries are not about controlling them. They are about protecting you. You decide what you will and will not tolerate, and you enforce it consistently. Every time you hold a boundary, you remind yourself that you are not helpless, that you have agency. And the more you practice it, the less intimidating their reactions become. Their anger, their sulking, their manipulations, those belong to them, not to you. Another powerful tactic is gray rocking, presenting no emotional fuel, no energy, no reaction. It is not about being cold or robotic. It is about being strategically uninteresting. They want drama, intensity, and attention. When you give them neutrality, they flounder. It strips away the performance stage they rely on. And in that emptiness, their insecurity surfaces. Outsmarting them is not about confrontation, but quiet resistance. You also need allies, not enablers who tell you to. Just get over it, or they didn't mean it. But people who validate your experience. Isolation is one of the narcissist's strongest weapons, because when you are cut off, you doubt yourself. But when you surround yourself with people who see you clearly, who remind you that you are not crazy, you weaken the narcissist's hold. They cannot bear environments where their narrative is not upheld. And finally, Perhaps the deepest way to outsmart a narcissist is to heal yourself. Because here's the truth, they prey on your wounds. Your desire to be liked, your need for approval, your fear of abandonment. Those become the levers they pull. When you do the work to know your worth, to trust your perception, to embrace solitude rather than fear it, you close the doors they keep trying to walk through. Their tricks no longer land because you are not operating from the same vulnerabilities. Outsmarting them does not mean crushing them in battle. It means rising above the battlefield altogether. It means reclaiming your energy, your peace, your focus. It means knowing that their breakdown is not your goal. But when you no longer play their game, when their manipulations hit a wall of calm, clarity, and boundaries, they do begin to crack. And you, instead of being entangled in their storm, are standing steady, finally free. Would you like me to adjust this to sound even more conversational? Like a direct talk she'd give in a lecture or YouTube video? Or keep it at this polished motivational level? When you are dealing with a narcissist, the first instinct most people have is to explain themselves, defend themselves, or try to reason with the unreasonable. This comes from the very natural human tendency to want fairness and clarity in relationships. When someone accuses you unfairly, you want to correct them. When someone twists your words, you want to clarify. When someone questions your motives, you want to prove your integrity. And in healthy relationships, that often works. Dialogue can restore understanding. But with a narcissist, the rules are different. They do not want understanding. They want control. They do not seek truth. They seek dominance. So the moment you argue, defend, explain, or plead, you are not restoring balance. You are stepping into their arena where the game is rigged against you. Narcissists thrive on reaction. The more emotionally invested you become in proving your side, the more power they gain. If you shout, they accuse you of being unstable. If you cry, they say you're too sensitive. If you stay silent and hurt, they'll call you cold or unloving. No matter how you respond, they twist it to maintain their upper hand. That is why the most radical act you can take is to stop playing their game altogether. It feels counterintuitive at first because your brain is wired to believe that if you just find the right words, the right moment, or the right proof, they will finally understand. But that day never comes. The liberation starts when you stop trying. Think of it this way. Narcissists need emotional energy like oxygen. They want you angry, defensive, desperate for their approval. Those reactions give them control. But when you do not engage, when you stop handing over your energy, you are cutting off their air supply. At first, they will push harder, provoke more, escalate their tactics. That's because they feel the control slipping. They may try to bait you with insults, sudden kindness, guilt trips, or playing the victim. But if you hold steady and do not react, their strategies eventually lose their sting. You are teaching yourself to step outside the performance they have scripted for you. This does not mean tolerating abuse in silence. It means knowing when engagement is futile and choosing not to waste your energy in battles you cannot win. It means responding strategically, not emotionally. For example, if they hurl accusations, you don't dive into a long defense. You respond with something simple and firm like, "I see it differently." That's it. If they try to bait you into yelling, you choose calm and neutrality. If they launch into endless circular arguments, you disengage instead of being dragged in. Each time you resist the urge to prove yourself, you are reclaiming a little more of your power. Stopping the game also means adjusting your expectations. When you stop expecting fairness, empathy, or accountability from a narcissist, their behavior stops shocking you. You stop saying, "How could they?" and start saying, "Of course they did. This is who they are." That mental shift changes everything. It lowers the emotional stakes because you are no longer bargaining with fantasy. You are dealing with reality, and reality is that this person will never give you the validation or resolution you want. Once you accept that, their manipulations lose much of their bite. It also helps to remind yourself that not reacting does not mean they have won. Many people fear that if they don't defend themselves, the narcissist will believe their distortions. But here's the truth: they were never seeking truth in the first place. They don't need evidence to justify their story. They will believe whatever narrative serves them. Your job is not to convince them. It is to protect your peace. Every moment you spend trying to correct them is a moment you lose in your own life. This strategy requires patience and practice because narcissists are experts at pushing buttons. They know exactly what to say to make you feel small, guilty, or enraged. But once you recognize that these are tactics and not truths, their words lose power. You can observe them the way you might observe a storm outside a window: chaotic, loud, even destructive, but not something you need to step into. You stay inside where it's safe, watching without being pulled into the whirlwind. When you stop playing their game, you also start to notice how much energy you've been giving away. All those hours of arguing, defending, crying, and analyzing, they drain you. By stepping out of the game, you reclaim that energy for yourself. You can channel it into things that actually nourish you: your work, your friendships, your passions, your healing. The narcissist will notice this shift, and it will unsettle them. Because when you are no longer their source of supply, they lose their grip. They may try harder to reel you back in, but the more you resist, the weaker their hold becomes. Ultimately, stopping the game is not about punishing them. It is about freeing yourself. It is about realizing that you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not have to keep justifying your worth to someone determined not to see it. You do not have to spend your life trapped in battles designed for you to lose. You can choose a different response, and in that choice lies your greatest strength. When you are dealing with a narcissist, knowledge and boundaries become your strongest forms of protection. Narcissists thrive in environments where there is confusion, self-doubt, and a lack of clarity. They count on you not knowing the names of their manipulative tactics. They count on you being too unsure of yourself to push back. And they absolutely count on you feeling guilty or afraid of setting boundaries. That is why when you start learning, when you begin to see the patterns for what they are, and when you enforce your limits with consistency, their entire strategy starts to unravel. Knowledge is power, and in this situation, it is emotional armor. When you recognize gaslighting for what it is, you no longer waste endless hours questioning your own memory or perception. Instead of saying, "Maybe I am being too sensitive, maybe I did misunderstand," you begin to say, "That's gaslighting, and I'm not going to engage in this circular conversation." Naming it creates distance between you and the manipulation. The same goes for projection. Instead of absorbing the blame when they accuse you of the very things they are guilty of, you can identify it clearly. That's projection. Triangulation, silent treatment, love bombing, smear campaigns. Once you know the vocabulary, you can't be tricked as easily. You see the moves for what they are, and that allows you to detach emotionally instead of getting swept away. But knowledge without boundaries is not enough. You can know everything about narcissism and still be caught in the cycle if you don't protect yourself with limits. A boundary is not about changing the narcissist. It never has been. A boundary is about clearly stating what you will and will not accept, and then holding yourself accountable for enforcing it. For example, if you say, "I will not engage in conversations where I am yelled at," then when the yelling begins, you do not stay and argue, you walk away. If you say, "I am not available for last-minute demands," then when they call you at midnight expecting you to drop everything, you say no, even if they rage or sulk. The power of a boundary lies in your consistency, not in their agreement. At first, boundaries feel terrifying. Narcissists do not like them. They will push back, punish you, ridicule you, or try to guilt-trip you into dropping them. That is why most people give up. They think, it's easier to just give in than deal with this reaction. But the truth is, every time you give in, you teach them that their tactics work. And every time you hold firm, you teach yourself that you are stronger than their manipulation. Over time, the narcissist may escalate, but they will also learn that you are not as easy to control. That shift, even if subtle, is powerful. Boundaries also give you clarity. They stop you from being dragged into endless debates and emotional exhaustion. For example, instead of arguing for hours about whether you're allowed to have your own opinion, you simply say, "I'm not discussing this," and disengage. Instead of trying to prove your loyalty when they accuse you unfairly, you set the limit, "I don't participate in conversations based on false accusations." Boundaries turn the focus away from convincing them, which is futile, and toward protecting yourself, which is within your control. There's another part of this, self-boundaries. These are the promises you make to yourself about how you will handle situations. You might say, "I will not respond to texts after 9 p.m., or "I will not let myself explain more than once." These rules give you structure and help you resist the pull of the narcissist's chaos. Because chaos is what they create, and boundaries are how you step out of it. It is also essential to understand that boundaries are not about being harsh or confrontational. They are about clarity. In fact, they can be stated calmly, even gently, but with firmness. The narcissist may react explosively, but your tone does not have to match theirs. You can be the steady one in the storm. That steadiness unnerves them because they thrive on throwing you off balance. When you combine knowledge with boundaries, you create a shield. You see the manipulation coming, you call it what it is, and you refuse to play into it. That is how you outsmart them. You no longer get caught up in defending, proving, or justifying. Instead, you stand in your truth with calm certainty. They may still attempt to twist reality, but it won't stick the way it once did. Their words won't have the same sting. Their games won't drain you as deeply. Because you have named it, and you have drawn the line, this combination does something even more important. It rebuilds your trust in yourself. Narcissistic manipulation works because it erodes your confidence in your own mind. But every time you label a tactic accurately, every time you enforce a boundary, you are reminding yourself that you can see clearly and act with strength. That restoration of self-trust is the foundation of your freedom. Once you truly trust your perceptions and know you have the right to set limits, the narcissist's control begins to dissolve. Narcissists thrive on attention, whether it comes in the form of admiration, conflict, or even your pain. To them, any energy you give is fuel. They don't care if you're shouting at them, sobbing in front of them, or pleading for understanding, because all of it proves that you are still engaged, still hooked, still orbiting their world. This is why starving them of attention is one of the most effective strategies you can use. When you no longer provide the emotional reactions they crave, the dynamic begins to shift. They may not show it immediately, but over time, the absence of your energy becomes unbearable for them, and it destabilizes their control. Starving them of attention is not about being cruel or vindictive. It is about reclaiming your energy and refusing to hand over the very thing they feed on. One of the ways to do this is through what is often called gray rocking. Imagine you are as emotionally interesting as a gray rock, neutral, dull, unreactive. When they try to provoke you, you respond in short, calm, factual statements. When they try to bait you with drama, you don't bite. When they insult you, you don't argue back. It is not about suppressing your feelings. It is about not giving them the performance they are trying to extract from you. Over time, they find this lack of reaction deeply frustrating, because without your emotional spark, their usual strategies lose impact. At first, they may intensify their behavior. They may escalate their attacks, say even crueler things, or switch tactics suddenly from rage to charm, just to get some kind of response from you. This is the moment where your resolve is tested, because it is tempting to fall back into the cycle. But if you can hold steady, if you can continue to withhold your attention, eventually the dynamic changes. They realize that you are no longer the reliable source of fuel you once were. This strategy requires you to see through the illusions they create. Narcissists are skilled at crafting drama, sudden emergencies, exaggerated stories, tearful confessions, or declarations of victimhood. All of these are designed to hook you back in, to make you rush to their aid, or to make you argue and defend yourself. When you recognize that this is simply another bid for your energy, you gain the ability to step back instead of jumping in. You can respond with neutrality or sometimes with no response at all. This doesn't mean you're cold-hearted. It means you're choosing not to be manipulated. Withholding attention also applies to the positive side of the cycle. Narcissists don't only thrive on conflict, they also thrive on adoration and constant validation. If you stop showering them with praise, if you stop catering to their endless need for reassurance, they will feel the absence. At first, they might accuse you of being selfish or distant. But what's really happening is that you are no longer feeding their inflated sense of self. By stepping back, you shift the balance of power. You remind yourself that you are not here to keep propping up someone else's fragile ego at the expense of your own well-being. It's also important to realize that starving them of attention does not mean cutting off your own feelings. You will feel anger, sadness, frustration, and grief. Those emotions are valid. The key is to process them in safe spaces, through journaling, therapy, supportive friends, or quiet reflection, rather than feeding them to the narcissist, who will only weaponize them. You keep your emotional world yours, instead of letting it become their playground. This approach builds strength over time. At first, it feels unnatural because your instinct is to respond, to fight back, to explain. But as you practice withholding attention, you start to notice how much calmer you feel. You begin to realize that you don't have to attend every argument they invite you to. You don't have to justify yourself every time they distort reality. You don't have to react to every jab or provocation. That freedom, even in small moments, is profound. As you starve them of attention, you also starve the cycle itself. The narcissistic dynamic depends on reaction. It is a constant push and pull designed to keep you locked in. Without your energy, the cycle weakens. They may lash out, try to punish you, or attempt to draw in new sources of fuel, but you are no longer playing your part. And that, ultimately, is what weakens their hold on you. By refusing to give your attention to their chaos, you redirect it to yourself. You reclaim your time, your peace of mind, and your sense of self. You invest that energy in your healing, your growth, and your connections with people who actually see and value you. That shift is what truly begins to dismantle their control. Because once you stop being a reliable supplier of attention, they lose the grip they once had over you. Narcissists are masters at finding the cracks in people's self-worth. They exploit insecurities, fears, and vulnerabilities in order to maintain control. This is why one of the most powerful ways to outsmart them is not to fight them directly, but to heal yourself so thoroughly that their tactics no longer land. When you reclaim your power, their words, accusations, and manipulations lose their ability to destabilize you. Healing and self-strengthening become your greatest tools of resistance. Because when you know who you are, you no longer need them to define you. At the heart of narcissistic manipulation is the ability to make you doubt yourself. They chip away at your confidence through gaslighting, insults disguised as jokes, constant comparisons, and subtle reminders that you are not enough. Over time, many people begin to internalize this narrative, believing they are less capable, less lovable, less worthy than they really are. That internal wound is exactly what the narcissist counts on. It is what keeps you apologizing for things you didn't do, over-explaining, or begging for their approval. The turning point begins when you start to rebuild your sense of worth from the inside out, independent of them. Healing is not a quick process. It is layered, and it requires compassion for yourself. It often starts with simply noticing the lies you've been told and refusing to carry them anymore. If you were told you are too sensitive, you reframe it as, I have empathy, and that is a strength. If you were told you are not enough, you remind yourself that you have inherent worth regardless of anyone's opinion. Each time you challenge one of these false beliefs, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was stolen. As you strengthen your sense of identity, their manipulations lose power. When they try to gaslight you into doubting your reality, you trust your perception. When they accuse you of being unloving, you know in your heart the care and kindness you bring to others. When they withhold affection to punish you, you no longer collapse into despair because your self-worth isn't tethered to their approval. This shift unsettles them deeply because the control they once had begins to slip. Another part of reclaiming your power is learning to embrace solitude rather than fearing it. Narcissists often keep people trapped through fear of abandonment. They make you feel like you cannot survive without them, that no one else will want you, that you are dependent on their presence. But when you begin to find peace in your own company, when you learn that solitude can be a place of rest, creativity, and self-discovery, that fear weakens. You are no longer terrified of losing them because you know you have yourself. That freedom terrifies them because it means they can no longer use your fear to control you. Supportive relationships also play a vital role in this healing. Isolation is a tactic narcissists use to maintain control. They cut you off from friends, undermine your family ties, or discredit anyone who affirms you. Reconnecting with supportive people who see you clearly is a way to counteract that isolation. When you have allies who remind you of your strengths, who validate your experiences, and who respect your boundaries, it becomes harder for the narcissist's distortions to take root. Their words don't echo as loudly when you have other voices affirming your reality. Part of reclaiming your power also involves shifting your focus back to yourself. Instead of spending endless energy analyzing their moods, anticipating their reactions, or trying to manage their feelings, you redirect that energy to your own growth. You invest in your health, your passions, your goals. You pour your energy into things that build you up rather than drain you. The narcissist will sense this shift and may react with anger, guilt trips, or attempts to pull you back into their orbit. But each time you choose yourself over their chaos, you are reinforcing the truth that your life belongs to you. This process of healing is not about becoming untouchable or never feeling pain again. It is about building resilience. It is about knowing that when someone tries to diminish you, it no longer defines you. It is about having the strength to walk away from manipulation instead of being ensnared by it. It is about trusting your own mind and heart enough that no one else can rewrite your reality. When you heal, you shift the entire balance of power. A narcissist cannot control someone who knows their worth, who trusts their perception, and who is not afraid to stand alone if necessary. Their tactics lose their grip because you are no longer the person they could once exploit so easily. You have become someone who sees clearly, who values themselves deeply, and who chooses peace over chaos. And in that transformation, you outsmart them in the most profound way possible, not by breaking them down, but by refusing to let them break you anymore. At the end of the day, outsmarting a narcissist isn't about winning an argument or forcing them to change. It's about reclaiming your power. It's about stepping out of the cycle of chaos they thrive on and choosing clarity, calm, and self-respect instead. When you stop playing their game, when you protect yourself with knowledge and boundaries, when you starve them of the attention they crave, and when you heal the very wounds they exploit, you shift the dynamic completely. They lose their grip because you no longer hand them the control they once had. And in that freedom, you rediscover your strength, your worth, and your peace. The very things they tried to take from you but could never truly own.